Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where I teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. Today we're going to hit on all of those things because my guest is Dr. Caroline Mallory, who is the Dean of the College of Health and Human Services at Indiana State University in Terre Haute, Indiana. Dr. Mallory, thank you so much for being with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Marcus. I'm truly honored to be invited.
Well, we had a really fruitful conversation recently, and I just like to be able to share some of your insights and knowledge with the community, and so I guess we should say that you're first and foremost a nurse, right?
That's correct. I'm not only a nurse, I'm an old nurse, right? I got my first degree in nursing in 1985. That's given me decades now of experience as a registered nurse, and it's opened so many doors for me. I'm really grateful for my nursing education and my opportunities for practice.
So let's go back even to before that first nursing degree. Did you always have an interest in healthcare, and did you always know you wanted to be a nurse, or what was your journey into nursing?
Well, like most people, I guess, especially at a very early age, I think I had some initial ideas, but the person who really inspired me to be a nurse was my mother. She was a nurse, and she received a diploma degree in Canada in the 1950s and then immigrated to California, and that's where I was born and raised. And if it weren't for her being a professional nurse and having a job, our family life would have been pretty difficult. My father left our family when I was about 6 years old, and my mom was the breadwinner from that point onward. And that really stuck with me, this idea that because of her professional accomplishments, her meaningful work, she could make a living for herself and her family. And that has stuck with me ever since then. And so that was really the impetus for becoming a nurse.
You mentioned several things there, not only being a nurse, but being able to support oneself and support one's family, and what a great way to be able to do it at the same time as you're giving to the community.
It's been amazing. Every stage of my career, Marcus, has offered up some new opportunity to make a difference. And it's always the question that I've asked myself as I've moved from one aspect of my career to another is, what is the next place? What is the next step for making a difference? And being a nurse at the bedside, it's very clear how you make a difference. You make a difference with every single patient, every day, their family. And then I moved into public health, which is a little broader scope. Your population-based health, that's an even bigger impact. I became a researcher. That, to me, was like the opportunity to make the longest lasting income, develop the evidence for practice. Being an educator is the same thing, right? I love seeing new student nurses become competent and confident and go out and make the same kind of difference that I did. As a dean of a College of Health and Human Services, it's a little less direct, right? There's no patient, there's no client. We certainly have students that I serve, but here it's more about empowering faculty and staff to support our students so that they can be successful.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that the patient becomes the student, and then the student becomes the faculty, and that's how we end up being able to influence large numbers of people through a manageable system.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask my guests to reflect on a time that someone was there for them or that they were there for someone else. And as you know, that goes back to my story of being in the emergency room with Jennifer and having her hold my hand and say, "I'm here." And it's also the same prompt that I give my pre-meds at Notre Dame at the beginning of every semester is to write on a reflection of a time that you were there for someone or that someone was there for you. And you shared a really beautiful story. I'm sure just part of that beautiful story on your jot form, but can you share that story with me again? I'd love to hear it from your mouth and instead of just from the screen.
Marcus, I think you're referring to my encounter with Grace.
Yes. Yes.
So that was, that was such a challenging experience for me. I'd been a nurse for quite some time. I was actually working on my doctoral degree, and I was carrying out my dissertation research. And I was working in a public health clinic, and people would come through the clinic for a variety of things. But I met Grace on the night that they were doing HIV/AIDS testing. This would have been in the late 90s, probably about 1995, 1996. And at that time, we weren't really paying very close attention, especially to women of color, but all women who were being exposed to HIV/AIDS. And Grace was kind enough to agree to participate in my study, and I asked her a series of questions about what was going on in her life, why was she there, and it was heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. Grace had grown up poor. She had had children early in her life. She had suffered both a number of abusive environments, and that had led, she felt, directly to her use of drugs and addiction. She lost her children as a result of that. She'd been homeless from time to time. And when I met her, she had been free of drugs for about 6 months or so and was feeling really good about that. Was still really struggling, though, financially, and was very much dependent on her then romantic partner. And she was there that night to be tested for HIV/AIDS because he was positive. And what I learned from her was this power of resilience in the face of challenge after challenge. And her story, her experience has always stuck with me. It really helped me to better understand what many people face on a day-to-day basis. And I really felt quite helpless in that circumstance, I'll be honest with you, Marcus. There really wasn't anything at that point that I could do to help her. But it did stick with me, and it just helped me to understand how important interventional work could be over time to help people protect themselves against HIV/AIDS, to generate research that would form the basis for evidence so that we could, help people to avoid this, at that time, was a much more dreadful disease than it is now. And she just is like this person who hangs over my shoulder on a regular basis, reminding me of how important it is, the work that we do every day with patients, with their families, and with larger communities.
I love that part with larger communities there. And I also reflect back to what you said, that they said there's really nothing you could do for her, but you listen to her. And somebody like that probably doesn't get listened to very often, right? They're up against systemic and cultural, financial, racial, etc. difficulties, and yet, like you said, comes back time and time again, and that is our community. These are our neighbors. These are, this is not somewhere far across the country. These are in our own neighborhoods.
I think it's very easy sometimes to forget that, right? That the health of our neighborhoods, our towns, our cities, our country, it starts with one person at a time. And I do believe in the power of nurses and other healthcare professionals to make a difference in that regard. And so, even though that was such an important lesson for me, listening to Grace, I do feel it stayed with me for a very long time. And I went from feeling helpless to feeling inspired and empowered. And I'm so grateful to her for that.
When else do you feel inspired and empowered in nursing or in your role as a dean?
Oh my. Well, I'll tell you what, there's hardly a week that goes by that something doesn't happen. I was sitting across my desk yesterday with a student nurse in our honors program, African American woman, coming out of pretty challenging circumstances, I would say, and doing well academically, but struggling financially. And her persistence is just amazing. She had, I think, smartly come to me to find out if I could help her on the financial side, and we will be able to support her. And that's one of the great things about being a dean is sometimes you have resources at your disposal that other individuals may not have, and so that's pretty cool. But I'll tell you what she has overcome to become a university student, to do well in the nursing program, which is one of our most competitive programs. It's pretty amazing what she's done. So I have to say it happens on a pretty regular basis, Marcus, and that that's the cool part of my job.
And I assume she's a non-traditional student?
Actually, traditional student,
Traditional
right?
student,
Yes.
awesome.
So we do have a number of adult learners in our nursing programs, and oh my goodness. But I will just tell you what we used to think of as a non-traditional student applies to many of our students today. So Indiana State in particular, we pride ourselves on creating access to higher education. That means a lot of our students come from lower income homes. They are Pell eligible. They're often first generation college students. So they don't have, a parent or a close family member maybe who's had this experience that can guide them. But a lot of our students are already parents. Almost all of our students work at least part-time, and many of them actually work full-time. It's amazing to me what they're able to accomplish. I'm not sure I could do it. I was an okay student, coming out of high school, going into a university, but what these students have to do to get into a university and then to finish their degree is I think quite a bit more difficult than it was when I became a nurse.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I could have worked and gone to school at the same time. That just would have been a lot more difficult for me. But I understand that a lot of people, that's just their norm. That's just their norm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for your student that you said sat across your desk, please email me after we talk today, and I wanna send you some books that can I gift those to her
Oh,
via you?
absolutely. Oh, well, that's
Okay.
very generous, Marcus. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. She sounds like the kind of person that, like we said, we can help out, and if there's
Hmm.
anything I can do to help out a committed student like that, that's what I like to do. So I always ask a couple of kind of random questions on the podcast too, and even though they're not really that random, they're more just kind of get to know you
Hmm.
things outside of the professional world. And one of the questions that I ask is if you were had to be living on the proverbial desert island, but you still have access to all of the things that you need, food and water and lodging, etc. But you did only have the ability to take one piece of an artistic creation with you. What would that be? Whether that's a painting or a book or a sculpture or a Broadway musical or a photograph, is there a piece of art that speaks to you?
Oh my goodness. That's such a difficult question, Marcus, because I usually think in terms of like top five in
Mhm.
different categories. It's hard
That's
for me to.
fine. That's fine. You could throw out any of those top
Oh
five.
goodness. Well, so for me anyway, I think music is is really important in my life. I'm a social dancer. My husband and I have been taking dance lessons for probably about 20 years, and I love to dance.
Cool.
Social dance, ballroom, all of those kinds of things. I would take I think I'd take Mustang Sally by Wilson Pickett. It's
Nice.
one of my favorite songs. It's a great West Coast swing
Hmm.
song, and if I had that, I could dance to it. I don't think I'd get tired of listening to it either.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. I learned that song in college and just had so much fun with it, going to a lot of blues jams over the years too.
Mhm. Mhm.
Any other pieces of art that are your favorite?
Oh, so I I love contemporary and modern art. I have to say the Impressionists, um, Picasso, and later, I it's that's just so hard. Oh my goodness. I feel like there's too many things to talk about. And um,
Well,
but I have to
Picasso to
say,
Pickett is a pretty wide variety
yeah.
of artistic realm.
So I will just tell you that we have a piece of art in the building that was created by an artist named Sayaka Gans, and it's this amazing sculpture of birds, all native to Indiana. And she's created this swirling sculpture that goes up our main staircase. It's 4 stories high. And she's made these birds out of found plastic objects. You can find her work all over the country. She's got an amazing display at the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. But she titled this Into the Sky, capital IN to the sky, and it's all these native birds. I'm also a birder, so
Mm.
I love to watch birds and listen to birds and identify them both visually and by ear. And my favorite bird on the sculpture is the turkey vulture. It is probably one of the least appreciated birds, but it's such an amazing bird. It's a beautiful bird, in my view, and it has these wonderful ways of defending itself. So when it is approached by a predator, it can projectile vomit on the predator. I mean, when you just think about the evolutionary characteristics that produced an animal, that's how it defends itself. But that is an amazing piece of sculpture, and I think more than anything, I love that it embodies this um, aspects of nature, but also how can we more do a better job of protecting our environment,
Mm.
um, and then just the grace and the beauty of the piece is really inspiring.
Well, thank you for that. That's very descriptive, and I love the layering of the, as you said, the environmentally social part of things along with the natural. Um, yeah, really interesting. Really interesting. Do you have a favorite book or a book that you often give as a gift?
Oh, so we're in another top 10 area. I have to
Yeah.
say that I am very much a science fiction nerd, and I have been since I was a kid. I've read a lot of fiction over the years. It's still probably my favorite genre. And I met my husband because we exchanged science fiction novels at Humboldt State University in Northern California, where we met. So we became friends first through the exchange of science fiction books. And I have to say that um, probably the book that I have loved and probably reread more than any other series is Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
Um, it is, I think, boy, it's just hard to put into words what a um, I think I first read it when I was probably about 12 or 13 years old, Marcus. And for someone who came out of poverty and not a super great family life in some respects, that ability to escape into a world where goodness prevails was just really important for me. And I continue to really, I just love the series, and I probably reread it every couple of years.
It's been a few years since I've read it, so I might have to go back and give it another read through. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. But yeah, interesting. And you say it's kind of hard to put into words. Well, maybe that's because Tolkien made up his own languages.
Well, and to be totally honest with you, I don't always read the songs. Sometimes
Hmm.
I will skip over the songs, but I do love the storyline. And there's a number of things that have been inspired by Tolkien's work. And I think there's some, anyway, this so much that we could talk about with regard to that, but
Absolutely.
I
We
love
could
the
probably
question.
sit here and talk sci-fi and fantasy books all day long. So for my last question for you is, if you had the world's tallest billboard on the world's highest mountain,
Mm,
what is the message that you would want to be known? What's the message that you would want humanity to know?
mm. You know, it's really funny, but on every birthday, if I'm asked to make a wish, Marcus, I wish for world peace. I know it's kind of trite and maybe cliche, but in my mind, our connection to one another and our genuine regard for one another is truly what can make a difference in the world. Um, Before you have money, before you have time, before you have any of those resources that are necessary to intervene with people, you have to have intent. And intent means that you have to have the motivation. You have to truly believe in your fellow humans and that they have the capacity to um, to have greater opportunity for themselves, to live a better life, whatever that looks like for them, right? And so world peace maybe is just a kind of a very global way of thinking about it. It could also be just to love one another. I think this idea of spreading kindness and gratitude, I think, are incredibly important ideas. And without that intent, without that positive motivation and genuine regard for other humans, I don't see how we accomplish anything of importance.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems kind of crazy that here we are. We've been around for 10,000 years at least as a modern species. Don't quote me on that. But yet we're still beating each other over the head with proverbial sticks and stones, just in the form of unmanned aerial assault vehicles and weaponry. We're still doing this to ourselves. It seems like we should be more evolved as people so far to be able to move past some of that.
One of the things I have to remind myself of is that, I can feel helpless and hopeless from time to time. And then I remind myself that I can do one good thing. Yesterday, I helped that student find some financial resources, and then I took her to get lunch.
Mm.
I can do one thing at a time to make a difference, either for myself or for others. And knowing that is incredibly powerful. And I just think it's really important that we keep that in the forefront of our minds, that every day we have the potential to make a difference. It might be a small one, but we never know, right? We just never know when that one word of kindness or that, that little, a smile even, a extension of friendship, anything can make a difference for another human being. I try
Well,
to
what you
remind
just
myself
said
of that.
there, you just made a difference to me because I sit there thinking that young lady will remember that lunch that you bought and shared with her forever. I'll tell you what, went through 5 years of college. None of my professors or deans ever bought me lunch. And I hope that that's a memorable experience of the gratitude and kindness that you spoke of earlier.
Well, what I hope from that, Marcus, is that she understands that someone believes in her, right?
Hmm.
And that's key, right? Just that little bit of, that little bit can help someone to underpin their confidence. And I think that's really important. And whether she remembers me or not is less important than, is she able to move forward from here and do what she needs to do to be successful?
Well, with support like yours, I'm sure she's going to be successful.
Uh,
And thank you for sharing your stories with us today. Thank you for being part of this episode, and um, yeah, thank you for your knowledge and wisdom and insight. I appreciate having you on.
As I said earlier, it's been a terrific pleasure, Marcus. I so appreciate the quality of your questions and the opportunity to be a part of the podcast. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. And listeners, thank you for being part of this episode of Compassion and Courage. This is the podcast where I teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. I want to invite you to visit marcusengel.com for all of your needs for keynote presentations, for compassion training in hospitals and healthcare systems, and for all of your weekly and monthly inspirational needs. Thanks so much for being part of this episode. Take care.